When you start learning about content strategy, you will notice a pattern. Everybody keeps talking about keywords and SEO strategies. And if you're like me, you know that there's something wrong. If you're thinking about content as a whole, it's like across different channels and in different formats. Most content you find out there on content strategy is only focused on one channel, which is SEO. Or even if it talks about other channels, it doesn't talk about a comprehensive plan that brings all these channels together. So I faced this dilemma like 2 years ago where I'm just like, I need to find out how to build a comprehensive content strategy. Where do I go? And my mentor at the time directed me, or rather recommended that I read a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumelt. Now, this book is not even a content marketing book, right? But it had some of the fundamental things that you need to understand about strategy in general. The first major thing was that a strategy is not a plan. It was interesting, or rather, you know what? It was mind-blowing for me because I just thought a strategy and a plan were the same thing. Like if I'm building out a content strategy, it's the same thing with content plan, right? But it's not. It's very different. To Rumelt, a content strategy would be made up of 3 things, or would have 3 steps if you're going by it. I'm going to read that. So the first thing it will have is a diagnosis that aligns problems, and then it will now have a guiding policy that sets out what we're going to do to solve the problem. Then it will have specific tactics that show what exactly we're going to do to resolve the problem. This was very different from anything that anyone had shared with me, and I was fascinated. But if we're being honest, it's still away from the world of content marketing. What made it clear was second resource, a Substack by Fio Dosetto, my former manager. She's a really good content strategist, by the way. So it's called How to Think Like a Strategist. And yes, I'll link both of them in this video so that you can read them. And what she said was similar to Rumelt's ideas, right? So you start by asking 3 questions when you're building out the strategy, reading from a laptop as well. The first question is what's going on, which is basically the diagnosis. And then the next question is where do we want to go, which is the strategy. And then the last question is how will we get there, which are the tactics. So by the time you ask those 3 questions, it will now help you think beyond keywords, think beyond SEO, think beyond doing random acts of marketing. So for example, let's say you're building out a content strategy for a fintech brand that is focused on auditors in like mid-sized firms, right? Making this on as I go. You are not going to start with things like what content does this type of audience want to interact with. No. You start with what's happening in the business. And this is so strategic because a lot of times there's a disconnect between leadership and marketing, because it sounds like we're just running about doing stuff and we're not considering the bigger picture. We're not considering how to move the business forward, maybe bring in more leads or increase revenue. So when you start with that, you've already built a business case for your content activities. So going back to the example, you say, okay, what's going on in business right now? Maybe we are experiencing steady growth, but we want to increase intention, or we want to convert more enterprise customers. And then from there you start to think, how can content fit into this? Then you now go into things like the audience. Where do they go? What channels are they focusing on when they're making buying decisions and things like that? And before you know it, you have something that is much more comprehensive than if you were just focusing on SEO, or if you were thinking of just building out separate channels that don't support each other. One thing I forgot to mention is that one of the questions you probably ask during this process, what are we already doing and where can we expand to, or how can we repurpose things? So by doing that, you now have an integrated set of actions that you are going to take. I'll get into the specifics in another video, but just reading through her newsletter made me realize that there is so much misinformation out there, and the best way to actually build a strategy is to follow these steps. Now, is it the only way? No, but I think the ideas that she and Rumelt outline of the diagnosis, the strategy, and then the tactics, those will help you build a stronger strategy than someone who is just going in blind and maybe following the advice of the first three ranking posts on Google. So I'll link to these resources in the description box so that you can read them on your own. If you have any questions, or like you have another topic you'd like me to cover, let me know. Thank you, and see you in the next video.